What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm absolutely honored to introduce you all to ritual abuse, mind control, and organized abuse survivor and overcomer turned whistleblower, loving mother, content creator, and educator, and the brightest soul lighting the darkness on fire, Della. A little bit about Della and what you guys can expect to hear about in today's episode. Born into a whirlwind of deception and terror in the shadow of Hollywood's false glamour, Della and her twin sister entered a world poisoned by their father's fractured mind and predatory legacy. A man who masked unimaginable cruelty behind charm, who carried the scars of his own abused childhood, yet chose to inflict fresh wounds, who yielded knives, guns, blood, and betrayal against the very family he created. From mere weeks old, Della endured horrors no child should ever know. Violations in the darkness, motel nightmares, basement imprisonments, fragmented memories of ritualistic chambers, underground tunnels, child sacrifices, and encounters with figures of power and fear. Systems failed. Biased courts, bribed judges, dismissed reports to the FBI, and therapists who turned away from the truth. The programming lingered like invisible chains, blurring boundaries and drawing further pain. PTSD crashed down like tidal waves during motherhood. Postpartum depression reopened old wounds. Isolation deepened, support evaporated. Yet through every shattering blow, Della refused to shatter completely. Instead, she rose. Through relentless self-education, pattern-breaking courage, and the raw determination to learn what no one taught, healthy boundaries, self-worth, the right to be believed, agony transformed into armor. Every day, her life is chosen, not because it becomes easily, but because she chose to break the cycle for her own children and for other survivors. Battles for breath, healing, and justice turn solitary struggles into a public crusade. By speaking out, Della shatters the silence that smothers so many survivors of childhood and ritualistic abuse. The declaration rings clear. No one stands alone, voices matter, shame holds no power, and isolation ends here. From the deepest abyss, the brightest light emerges, and Della is unbreakable. And that unbreakable light does not merely shine, it radiates outward in ever-widening circles, touching lives she may never meet, inspiring courage in hearts that have long forgotten how to hope. Every time Della has chosen to speak, every time she refuses to let shame win, every time she models fierce, protective love for her children, she plants seeds of possibility in the soil of others' pain. She proves that healing is not a straight line or a gift bestowed by others. It's a daily, deliberate act of rebellion against despair. She demonstrates that the most profound strength is born not in the absence of wounds, but in the refusal to let those wounds define the story's final chapter. Della's journey reminds the world that survivors are not defined by what was done to them, but by what they choose to become in spite of it. She's living proof that the human soul can endure the unimaginable and still choose beauty, still choose love, still choose to stand up and say, "This stops with me." And her quiet victories over each sunrise, in her loud advocacy for the voiceless, in her unwavering commitment to break cycles that tried to break her, Della redefines what victory looks like. It's not the erasure of scars. It's the decision to wear them as badges of a war already won, and to use that hard-earned wisdom to light the way for those still walking through the night. Because of Della, silence loses its grip. Because of Della, belief becomes possible again. Because of Della, the next girl who feels alone in her pain will one day look back and see that someone walked through the fire first and came out the other side, not diminished, but radiant. The world rises higher in the glow of that radiance, and it will keep rising, carried forward by the unstoppable force of one woman's refusal to surrender and one survivor's courage to turn her deepest wounds into the world's brightest hope. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, voice for the voiceless, survivor and anti-child abuse advocate, fierce mama bear, walking miracle, and an absolutely incredible woman shattering the silence and becoming the hero she needed as a child. The one, the only, Della. Della, it is an honor to have you on today. Thank you so much for joining us.
That was absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much. That was, oh my God, that was amazing. Thank you. That was really moving.
You're so deserving of it. I'm just so grateful that you're here. We've been talking for a little while, and I found your TikTok page not too long ago and was just blown away by your selflessness and giving these vulnerable parts of yourself to a public audience that you can't see on the other side of your screen, and for all the work that you're doing to educate, to add humor. Some of your posts are so cute and funny. And then to also share parts of your testimony that hopefully can resonate with others and make other people feel less alone. And I know we'll talk a little bit about your crusade through whistleblowing publicly a little bit later in the show. But I wanted to start to introduce you through some historical dialogue around your family. You know, I think people, because of Hollywood and movies, think that abuse is just this thing that happens randomly in the dark. A stranger pops out of an alleyway and attacks. And of course that happens. But in most cases, abuse happens through people that are not only close to the child, but by people who have been abused themselves. It's usually not just a random thing in any way. And so I thought we'd start by outlining some of your own family and, you know, some of what you've been able to put together of their history.
Absolutely. So my dad was born in Canada. He is French Canadian. He was born in the 1960s. He had, I can't remember exactly how many brothers and sisters he had, but he did have a few. And they were raised on a farm out in the middle of nowhere. I know that my dad, based on testimonies from my grandmother before she passed away, was heavily abused along with his siblings, physically and sexually. They were subjected to things like they were forced to watch animals being slaughtered on the farm when they were really, really young. They were really subjected to a lot of trauma, which obviously had a big effect on all of them. They all suffered from severe mental illnesses in adulthood, which I believe to be a result of the trauma. His sister was diagnosed with bipolar. She's currently an artist. And he was also diagnosed with bipolar from a young age, and was started on lithium from a young age. He moved to Los Angeles when he was 17, where he trained as a hairdresser for Vidal Sassoon. It was through that he met a very well-known makeup and film artist named Mike Mills, who sort of saw potential in him and took him under his wing. I often talk about the term selling your soul to the devil. People think that it's this sort of, you know, the devil comes and you have to sign a contract, and it's kind of like what's depicted in movies, but it's not. What it is accepting a position. That position could be working for someone in power. But I think basically what I'm trying to say is selling your soul to the devil is doing horrific tasks in order to gain, how do I say, fame and to be the best in your career, which is essentially something my dad did. I believe he agreed to take part in something in Hollywood in order to climb the ladder of his career. So he was a very well-established makeup artist. He also worked as a prostitute in his early 20s, which is something that he had disclosed to my mother. He kind of quoted that everyone in Hollywood does this. It's the normal thing to do. Again, sort of selling your soul to the devil, I suppose. But yeah, so that's how he ended up in Hollywood as a makeup artist.
And what about your mother? What was her life like? And what do you think made her sort of vulnerable to being sought out by somebody like your father?
My mom grew up in a very large family in Dublin, in sort of the rougher part of Dublin. She had 5 brothers and 3 sisters. I think I could be wrong on that. It could be 4 brothers and 3 sisters. But there were a lot of them. She was the eldest girl, and she was a twin. Apparently, her mother had a very rough and traumatic birth, and she really did not want to be pregnant with them, which she believes resulted in her taking a lot of her anger out on my mother specifically. So my mom kind of was on the receiving end of a lot of verbal and physical abuse, and I suppose emotional neglect in that sense. She as well, from a very young age, left the household. She began working as a chef since she was 15. Eventually, she moved abroad. She left everything behind. And when she initially moved to Los Angeles in California, she was selling magnets on a magnet cart. So she went from being one of the head chefs in the Burlington Hotel in her early 20s to selling magnets in a place where she knew absolutely nobody. And eventually she ended up working in a bar in Hollywood, where she would see a lot of celebrities come and go. And then one night she met my dad. Now, my dad had a very sort of enigmatic yet captivating, I suppose, presence. He was extremely charming. He was extremely handsome. He was very tall, broad. From my memories as well, he used to wear a black coat down to his ankles. And he was extremely confident, and he would easily make everyone in the room his friend very easily. So they got married after a couple of months of knowing each other. Bear in mind, at this time, she was actually in the States illegally because her visa had expired. So she was very cautious about sort of like what she did and stuff because she did not want to get into trouble. So she married my dad. She became pregnant after very quickly into the marriage. And then I suppose the curtain started to fall. And this picture perfect life that she had been sold, such as like multiple properties, this beautiful, stunning cabin house that they would go to holiday in during the summer, as well as his massive house in Los Angeles with a swimming pool and a jacuzzi. She really thought that she was going to be set up for life, basically. So within a couple of weeks into marriage, he raped her. She fell pregnant with my sister and I, and after that, his true colors started to show. The veil was essentially lifted, and she started discovering his bipolar medication. She was unaware up to this point that he had any form of mental illness. He would disappear for weeks on end. She would have absolutely no contact with him, no idea where he was. And he would start manic buying things. So all of these deliveries would start showing up to the apartment. And once we were born, when we were a couple of weeks old, my mom was in the hospital for a very long time. She almost died giving birth to us. When she finally got home with us, I think we were about 2 days old, he invited a load of people over to the house for a party. And she had to clean the place from top to bottom. These people came over, and they later testified that she was an unfit mother because the place was filthy and not acceptable to have newborn babies in. Again, when we were a couple of weeks old, he would go missing. She would wake up very early in the morning and she would leave the apartment with us in a stroller. She bought her stroller in a secondhand shop. And because he would give her no money, he was in control of all finances. He was in control of everything. And she was scared. Before I speak about anything else, she was terrified to go to police because she was still in Los Angeles and she didn't want them to see that she had outstayed her visa. Yes. So she would make do. She bought a secondhand buggy that was actually a stroller. It was way too big for my twin and I. And on occasion, we would like slip out the bottom of it and like she'd have to pick us up from the street because we'd just be sitting on our bums on the street. But she would leave first thing in the morning and she wouldn't come back till late in the evening, first of all, because she was trying to stay away from him for as long as possible because she was so scared of him. And there were times where she would come back and the apartment would be absolutely trashed. And on one occasion, there was blood all over the walls. And the term Irish, C-U-N-T, was written in blood all over the walls. My dad used to sleep with a really large knife under his pillow. And then I suppose a breaking point that my mom sat us down and she told us about when we were about 9 was that there was one particular night my mom woke up to my dad stomping on her head. I was in the bed beside my mom. My sister was in the cot. My mom lifted my sister because my dad was getting more and more aggressive, more abusive. He was shouting at her. He was screaming at her. So she managed to take my sister and put her into the wardrobe, inside the door of the wardrobe that was beside her. And at that point, my dad lifted up this old rocking horse and he threw it at the wall and it smashed and it missed my sister by like an inch. And then he took out a gun and he was pointing it at us. He was pointing it at her and he told her that he was going to blow her head off. I think this made my mom realize that like this is bad.
Did she know whose blood that was? Was that his own?
She has no idea. She was under the impression that multiple women were brought back to the apartment because there were urine stains and what she believed to be period stains on the mattress. For sometimes when she would come back when she'd been away during the day. There were also her maternity clothes were missing, and she believes that he was gifting them to other women because later on, through going through the legal system and the legal battle, she would find out that my dad had previously been married multiple times for the purpose, what I believe to be the purpose, of impregnating women to gain full custody of the children, because that was what his main source of income was exploiting children. On my dad's salary, there was no way he could live the life that he was living. He left his job then, I think when we were about 13. And he was like abruptly kind of moving countries all the time. And he had no source of income at that stage, yet he was always able to live this luxury lifestyle. So anyway, when we were a couple of weeks old, This part has never really made sense to me, but somehow my dad convinced my mom to give him a second chance and move to Canada with him. And this would be our new start. And we could be this happy family. And she believed as well his family were in Canada and they would be a support. So we all moved to Canada when we were a couple of weeks old. Within a couple of days of us moving to Canada, my dad disappeared again. And I think not long after that, he filed for divorce. And my mom was told she would be deported back to Canada, or not to Canada, to Ireland. Which meant that my dad would automatically be granted full custody to my sister and I.
And how old were both of you again?
We were a couple of months old at this stage.
Months old, okay.
But what my dad didn't expect was that my mom would fight the Supreme Court without legal representation to be granted custody to take us back to Ireland. But because the trial and the court case was so complex, there were so many kind of, with her allegations and with his allegations, and then obviously with our disclosures, there were therapists involved, there were child psychologists involved. There were so many aspects involved that had to be like taken into account, and so it took a couple of years. And in that time, we were living in a single parents complex in Vancouver. Those people in the single parent complex that we grew up with until we were 5 are the people who I would consider being my family today. They're the people who send birthday cards and check in every Christmas and birthday. And it's funny because my sister and I can remember everything from the complex, and from that age, it's such immense detail. But when we moved to Dublin, I can't remember anything after that. And I think it was just because it was such like a defining moment in our sort of childhood and development.
And how old were you? You were born in California.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Then a few months into your childhood, or your infancy, I should say, moved to Canada. How old were you when your dad threw the divorce papers at your mom?
I think we were a couple of months old. I think for a while my mom was happy with him just being gone, because she still had her citizenship in Canada. So she was like, okay, he's leaving us alone. We're still getting on with things. But then obviously he filed for divorce. So.
And you said you and your sister disclosed. How old were you? Because this obviously it was a little process. How old were you guys when you shared abuse stories?
We would have been between the ages of 2 and 4.
Oh my God.
So especially during play therapy was like about expressing our emotions through play. So we would be playing and we would show our child therapist, we would reenact sexual abuse and different things that had happened to us with things like dolls and stuff.
Oh my gosh.
I think we were so heavily programmed as well at that stage, that we were so protective of our dad, and of our mom. So it was very difficult for our child play therapist to get through to us and to get that full testimony from us, because we were told, like, it was engraved into our brains that you are not allowed to talk about this. Your parents are good people. If you talk about this, you are a bad person. As well as what I now believe to be done through programming, from speaking to a fellow survivor, is that very specific things in relation to, in particular, the ritualistic abuse that I went through and experienced. There are keywords that I have never to this day been able to say out loud. I can't explain it. I've Googled it through the years. I thought there was something so wrong with me. I could never find anybody else that experienced this. And they could be like everyday words, but I'm just not allowed to say them. And it's still like that. Like, I still can't bring myself to say these words, but they are keywords in the abuse that I went through, which is something I've connected now. So it kind of makes sense. But yeah, obviously those things made it difficult to prove, because I suppose essentially we were protecting our dad. And then
Which
as
is
well,
something a lot of people don't, realize these emotional elements. I think a lot of survivors, as they get older and they share, people are like, first of all, a child can repress memories, so they don't always like have it at their forefront. They need to survive, so they shove the memories down. They go to school and they're little kids, But what people don't realize is that, predators, pedophiles, they have a grooming process. It's not just, like I said, shoot out of the alley and like it's this intense abuse right away. There's a process, like a conditioning, to where they increase the intensity. And in that, they're telling you, I love you. I love being with you. You're my daughter. You're my friend. You're this. Like, this is love. This is what we do. And so then the child has like this distorted version of like what love is. And they think that, equate abuse with love. And that's done by design too. Like, if you knew that you were being abused, if he told you that and you knew it was wrong, then you would know to tell somebody that this is wrong. But when they have to invert it and make you feel like that's the normal thing, that's just what we do, And so it's really sick, like that process. How old were you when he started grooming you? Did this start?
I would have been a couple of days old. So it was a couple of days after I got out of the hospital with my mom. My mom at one stage came downstairs. She woke up to me missing from the bed. And she found my dad in the dark holding me with my nappy off. And I suppose a mother's sort of intuition is never wrong. She knew at that point, like, there were immediate red flags and alarm bells. There was no explanation for that. And he had this look of panic over his face that he had been caught. I know that growing up, especially when we were in Canada, my sister was always referred to as mommy's girl, and I was always referred to daddy's girl. And massive, again, I think what was part of my conditioning is that I've never been allowed to speak about my mom. I have never allowed myself to be. And then we were never allowed to when we moved to Ireland at 5, we were never allowed to therapy. We were never allowed to talk about anything that happened to us, to any of the family, to anyone, ever, because we were told we would be taken off of her. So, yeah.
And so what ended up happening with the court? So she's fighting. Your dad didn't expect her to go in and fight. What was the result of the custody battle?
So the result of the custody battle was, over those couple of years, our dad was frequently granted custody to us. She would fight it because we would come home from visits with him, and we would be completely traumatized. And we would be disheveled, we would be sick, we would be covered in bruises. On another occasion, when we were brought to the hospital after a visit with him, there were signs of ritualistic abuse. So there were lacerations to our private areas. There's no reason they should have been there. So the custody process, we had a child psychologist assigned to us by the courts. that child psychologist is who I believe to be one of my worst abusers. The abuse that I went through as a child, I was told by the play therapist, and my mother was told by the play therapist, that whatever I had gone through was so severe that it had completely broken me. And as a result of that, I would more than likely never be able to remember anything that happened to me because I had pushed it so far down at that stage as a method of survival. I was told that the only way I would be able to live any form of life would be if my brain completely just pushed everything away. So, but this child psychologist was always in my memories. And then I think it was when I was 15 or 16. So from the age of 5, 6, 7, all through the years, I would frequently speak about two people. And they were my child psychologist and a woman who I now, with my whole heart, believe to be Ghislane Maxwell. My child psychologist I would describe both of them. And I had no idea. No one showed me photographs of them. No one showed me anything. These were purely from memory. And I remember when I was 15 or 16, I started having these very horrific nightmares about both of them. One nightmare was that I would get up from my bed and I would go to the vanity and I'd sit in front of it and I would look into the mirror, and my child psychologist, or depending on the night, it could be Ghislane, would come up behind me and they would put their hand over my mouth and they would tell me that they would just tell me to shh, and I would be so hyper aware that my mom was downstairs and my sister was in the room because we shared a room, that I could not wake them up and I couldn't make them aware of what was happening to me in these dreams. And then eventually, when I was about 16, I asked my mom who the child psychologist was. She told me his name. I looked him up, and he was the man that had been haunting all of my dreams, like the man I had been describing. And he has a peculiar look. He doesn't have a common look. And I'm like, that's him. I'm not crazy. And then it was the same with Ghislane. From a very young age, I would always describe this woman. And again, I would be told, no, that never happened, you're crazy. And then when I was very young, there was something about her on the news. And I remember pointing to her and I was like, Mom, that's the woman. And she was like, what are you talking about? I was like, that's the woman from our childhood. And it was brushed off, I think, especially because at this time, there was nothing about Epstein or anything like that in the media. There was no reason to believe that there would be even a possibility of these people being involved in our childhood. But yeah, so against my mom were all of these very powerful people working against her, writing false reports, and the judge at one stage was paid off $200,000, sorry, to continue granting my dad access to my sister and I. So she was up against a lot. She was up against a lot. At one stage, my dad's solicitor walked out of the court during a hearing, because he couldn't take it anymore, and he walked out and he never came back, according to my mom. But yeah, she did. During the trial, a lot of strangers reached out to us and they offered to hide us in their basements and stuff. There were people following this case. And then eventually my mom was granted, she was granted full custody of us and allowed to bring us back to Ireland. So everything stopped after that. Everything went quiet. I do believe people often say, okay, well, how did you survive? They kill people. that kind of specific group. Like, why would they let you live? At the time, my uncle was the Lord Mayor in Dublin, and my family were very sort of well known in politics. Um, and there was actually a newspaper article about my mom in Canada saying like the Lord Mayor's sister is in Canada causing trouble or whatever like that. But I do believe that these people and these traffickers and all of these people, they go after children specifically and adults who will not be, they need there to be no questions asked. And if we were to have gone missing, there would have been questions asked, you know?
Oh my gosh, what a tumultuous, just that part, not even including the abuse, just going through so much, moving different countries, custody battles, you're going back and forth to two different parents' homes, you're having to do these therapies very young and try to make sense of things that no child should ever have to make sense of with your twin, and then ultimately, going in and out of court. That had to have been so much overload to just go through that alone. And on top of that, behind the scenes, you're being ritually abused by these people that you just named, especially your father, but you're having your psychologist, you're having, things going on with him. You're being introduced to other people behind the scenes, like Ghislane, that should have never been in your life to begin with. And, you have all these different layers of things happening at such a young age. And so talk a little bit about that side of it. So you're on the outside, there's sort of these somewhat normal things. Custody battles aren't rare and they're public. A lot of children go through them. This was an especially difficult one because you had two sort of unstable parents that were unstable in different ways and complicit in their own ways to what you and your sister were going through. And then behind the scenes, you're going through these secretive abuses that are not seen from people in school and from the public. Can you talk a little bit about what was going on behind the scenes and when would these things happen?
So again, I've blocked a lot of it out, but from what I can remember, there was one particular occasion where every single time we were forced to go on a visit with our dad, I remember being screaming, a lot of screaming, and multiple people holding us by our arms and legs, putting us into the back of a car. And I remember my mom standing behind glass doors saying, "Oh God," with her hand over her mouth, because it was so traumatic for anybody to witness. But at the same time, I don't remember who all of these people were that were holding us and forcing us into these cars. And then we would be taken away. And often it would start out in a small apartment with our dad. He would give us a blue drink. We were always really excited about this. Like, we were never, first of all, we couldn't afford sweets. We couldn't afford junk food or anything like that, so we never had it. But our dad always, he spoiled us, like, in every way. Like, anything we wanted materialistically, he would give us, which we weren't very used to. So that was like an up part. It kind of made up for the difficult parts of being with him, obviously. He would buy our affection, I suppose. And his way of apologizing to us was through material things. So one thing that was constantly spoken about was that every single night of the week, I just remember this specifically, pizza. Every single night of the week, pizza was brought up by my dad. And we would go back from these visits and we would tell my mom that about pizza. And we would just constantly, continuously go on about pizza. And our mom would just give out and say, like, "Yes, stop giving you junk food." And we'd be like, "No, you don't understand." But But again, that's like one of the things that's kind of adding up now. And I'm like, that's a weird coincidence. Another thing is we would be brought to places. We would be given this blue drink, and we would be brought to places. Now, this blue drink, once we would take it, we wouldn't really remember anything after that. I know that much. It would make us very sick. I remember one time we woke up in a basement. I specifically remember it because we were on these bare mattresses with no sheets on them, on the floor underneath the stairs that came down into the basement. And there was this sound. It was like this humming. And what the sound was, it was coming from all these like really large industrial sized freezers that were down with us. And I remember my sister and I would just be laying there and we would just be holding hands. And we would be scared, like we would be very scared. And then another memory is specifically with Ghislane that I always spoke about was we were standing outside this mansion. We were brought to this mansion. We were told this man and this woman were Daddy's friends, his really good friends. And Ghislane was sort of assigned to us as our protector. She would like take us away and the men would go off. And we never knew what they were doing, but Ghislane would take us. We would get into like little bathing suits and she would play with us in the sprinklers outside the front of this like ginormous like yellow mansion. And she would spend time talking to us and like trying to get to know us, and we trusted her. We really liked her.
Were there other children there in these
No.
instances? No, just you and your sister.
Yeah. It was never not in these situations. No, it was just my sister and I. Another like kind of flash memory I've spoken about since really early childhood that no one has ever believed me about. My mom didn't believe me about. No one listened. I would always describe a dentist chair. With that we would be strapped down to. And there would be a video camera there. Now, I don't remember the dentist chair to be like in the picture that was released online from Epstein's house. I do not remember it to be like that or faces on the walls or anything. What I remember is it was a dentist chair and it would have been more like kind of, like it's like the movie Hostel. It was more like that environment. It was dirty. It was really dark. It was just dirty and disgusting and rusty. The thing is, what I believe now is that these things it wasn't a matter of we were brought to these like disgusting old places. I truly believe that these places were sets. Everything was placed there for a reason. There was no screw or bolt or crack in the wall that wasn't intentionally placed there for a purpose. But I do remember the chair, and again, it's something that's affected me in life now, especially going to the dentist. My first visit to the dentist, I was completely inconsolable. I screamed the entire place down, and the dentists had to hold me down. And again, it was just that I was overreacting. Another time, we were one of the worst times that, like, from what our mom says, we were taken away. And she said there was an occasion where our dad came back and he drove past the house to collect something. He had forgotten our favorite toy. And she said she saw us in the back of the car and we looked drugged and completely out of it. Like, we were not there. And she said that was one of the worst experiences of her life because she had no say in it. She couldn't do anything about it. She couldn't intervene. she had to watch him drive away with us again. But we were brought in this rental car. I remember being at a garage and him paying someone and taking this black car. It was the middle of the night. Again, we were given a blue drink. We were dressed in these little like doll clothes, like doll-like clothes, like old-fashioned doll clothes, with baby doll coats. And then the next thing I remember is we were in this forest. Everything was like purple and blue. There were a lot of flashlights flashing around the place. There were other children there this time. And there were a lot of adults, except all the adults were masked and wearing gowns. And this is why I never spoke about this, because it sounds insane. In fact, I tried to tell my therapist about this during my postpartum depression thing, and he told me that I was basically making it up to depict the level of trauma that I had experienced. Like as a way of like, but that it never actually happened. But this particular night, things were blue, they were purple. My dad was there, and he was really excited. He was really proud of us. And then next of all, I remember running. I just remember running as fast as I could, and it was cold. And it was scary. I didn't like the dark. I didn't know where we were. There was a lot of noise. There were a lot of weird noises and sounds of footprints and running, and I didn't know where my sister was. And that was my biggest concern at that time, was where was she? And then next of all, I remember everyone was standing in this like semicircle. Except we were on the opposite side, my dad, my sister, and I could see like there were all these people kind of standing in this semicircle side by side, and they were still wearing their masks and gowns, and our dad was beaming. He was absolutely beaming. My sister was standing beside me. She was wearing the same thing that I was, but in a different color. And this little boy he was lying on this piece of tarp. He was, how do I say, his eyes were like hollow. He was gray. He was completely gray. He was, I know this is really morbid, he had not been freshly killed. He had been dug up after a while. He had no shoes on. His clothes were torn. He was covered in dirt. He was absolutely filthy. And I didn't really understand what was happening. Someone was standing over him. Again, everyone was beaming, so happy. But I know that my dad was really proud of us because we had essentially won. My sister, she recalls a murder of a child taking place. I don't remember that part. I just remember that child. But I know that when we got home from that and we were given back to our mom, she said we were different children and we were never the same since. And we had this really big old trunk at the bottom of our stairs. And I would have these nightmares every single night that this little boy would crawl out from underneath the trunk. I would come down the stairs for whatever reason. He would come out from the bottom of the trunk and he would pull me by the feet and drag me under the trunk. And he would sexually abuse me. And other things happened with a word that I can't say. I know that's really weird.
Weird.
Doesn't make sense.
Do you know, and you were so little, I can't imagine you may have the answer to this, but do you know why they were beaming so much in your memory? I know your sister has a slightly different experience that she remembers with with a child sacrifice type event happening. Why were they beaming, do you think? And why was your dad so excited about this little boy? Was there something like special about him, or like?
It wasn't necessarily about the little boy. I'm so sorry if you can hear my dog barking.
Oh, it's okay. Don't worry.
It was about the fact that the event had been completed. Everyone was beaming because we were made to feel like it was an honor to take part of whatever this was. But yeah, we were made to feel like we had partaken in this extremely special thing, that we should be honored to have taken part in it. Everyone was just happy to be there because it was an honor to be there. And this event had been completed, and everyone was just really happy because it was successful in whatever way.
And so you were like his shining stars in that moment. He was like proud of you two for completing this deranged event.
Yeah, I remember being told to watch it and that there was absolutely nothing to be scared of. Again, that this was a really positive thing and that we had taken part in something really positive, and that we shouldn't look away. We need to embrace it.
Now, when you say that you guys were running, was this along the lines of other testimonies where survivors have remembered these sort of hunting events where they send these children out, and it's kind of whether the children are actually hunted or more made to be scared and fearful? Do you remember being chased, or it being sort of like this hunting type event?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. It was definitely a hunting event. I don't necessarily know what would have happened if they caught us. I don't remember anyone ever catching me or anything like that, or being abused at this event or anything like that. But I do remember being fearful for myself and my sister, more importantly. And we were running for our lives. We knew deep down that we were running for our lives, but that's all I know.
And so then your father was so elated that his two children weren't caught.
Mm-hmm.
It's just disgusting that he even, just the fact that you guys were there, much less that's what he's happy about. It's just so twisted.
I do remember as well that, I don't know how I remember this, but I know that boys were more valuable than girls. My dad would frequently dress my sister and I up as boys, as toddlers, and we never knew why, but we were always told that boys were more valuable than girls, and he was always, I think, really quite disappointed that we were girls. So yeah, that was strange.
How many other children besides you and your sister do you remember being at this specific event?
I don't remember. The only kind of thing that I can remember is silhouettes of people. The silhouettes of the adults kind of wearing the gowns and masks. I remember them, but I remember silhouettes of smaller people there. And then obviously the little boy, but that's all I remember. Everything is it's just blurry now. There was another memory I have, core memory, that I always spoke about, which again, no one believed, and it never made sense to anyone. I was brought to this white room. This was underground. Everything was white, the walls, the floors. There was nothing in the room that wasn't white except the table. There was just a steel table right in the center. And I was strapped down to the steel table. I know this is going to sound insane. There was a video camera in the corner, and then this man entered. And this man was supposedly, I don't know how to explain this, the man I knew was the main guy. He was the main man, like the most important one, whatever that means. And he was dressed completely in black. Like, he had everything about him black. He was wearing a black mask, black hat, gloves, completely black. And then everything's a blank after that. I don't remember anything happening after that. But I know for a fact that I find like any sort of examining tables or anything like that extremely disturbing and triggering. And then there was another memory as well where, and also it was in a report that my sister and I were not returned home on our return date. So there was a police search out for us, and we were eventually found in a motel. My sister was undressed and lying asleep in the hallway, very kind of out of it. They kicked down the door, and I was found in the bed with my dad. And again, according to the therapist, whatever had happened that night was very traumatic, and it really caused me to push memories out of my.
I wanted to ask too before we move on. You may have been too young or just didn't know. Do you think your father was involved with a specific cult or organization, sort of like a secret society type thing? How did all these people kind of come together, do you think, that were involved with this?
I don't know of any specific cults or organizations, mainly because I haven't looked into anything.
Sure.
And again, that's been something that has been engraved into my memory until I spoke with another Ramkoa survivor recently. And I was kind of just talking to her a little bit. I was very kind of reluctant. I was nervous. She was the first sort of person that had experienced this that I was speaking to properly. And I kind of said a couple of things to her. I was like, I've never looked into anything before because I've always had it in my brain that I'm not allowed to. And she was like, oh, that's quite interesting. And I said, no, I have these firm beliefs, like the things like not being able to say certain words and defending my mom and not remembering. Like I have these beliefs that are engraved into my brain that. And one of them is that I am not allowed to look into anything from when I was a child, that I have to remember things eventually myself if I ever do, but that I will not. And it was only speaking to her, I was sort of like, okay, there are all these like other cults and stuff like that. But I felt really kind of silly for not knowing what they were, considering what I had been through. And then as well, like obviously the questions I've received through social media and stuff from other survivors saying, hi, were you part of this? Were you part of that? And like I have no idea what any of those things are. But I do believe the way he had met, I believe whether or not the whole organization was run through Epstein or someone higher than him, I don't know. I don't remember ever meeting Epstein.
But obviously, Ghislane was part of the story, so there's some tie-in to that network, whether or not it was directly with Epstein or not. Your dad seemed enmeshed in the same circles.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. I believe that what they did is that they recruited people. I believe they recruited people who could supply them with children and content that could be sold on the dark web. And that's how they were able to live the lifestyles that they were living. The elite gained something out of it. And then the people who were providing them with these sources, they were getting something out of it. And essentially as well, it was all profit, all of it was profit because they didn't have to put money into anything. The profit was coming through children and being able to exploit them and make content of them, but they didn't have to pay us to do that, they had to pay, obviously, like they would pay the people who were supplying and they would pay themselves, but they weren't paying the subjects,
And I just want to say too, Della, nothing you're saying at all sounds crazy whatsoever. I've listened and heard thousands, literally thousands of testimonies. I have hundreds on my podcast, and I've talked to thousands of people who have reached out to me. These things that you're saying come up so frequently, it would blow your mind. So frequently, from dentist chairs to being underground to sets that are specifically set up almost like a recording studio or a Hollywood, set for a movie. That is literally what these people partake in to create, whether it's, CSAM, child sexual abuse material, films, photos, or just situations to put a child in to traumatize them or to do, whatever it is that these people like to do with children for their own, perversions. And so I just want to say, like, I've heard these things that you're talking about that might sound crazy to you and that other people have called you crazy for. And it couldn't be less true. Like, this is all completely validating to other things that I've heard and to other survivors' experiences. Wow. The dentist chair, even, I've lost count. I couldn't tell you how many hundreds of times I've heard dentist chair specifically.
See, I suppose I had a big fear about that because it's one of the most well-known photographs that have been released in the files, and obviously a lot of people are going to jump and focus on that. But again, it wasn't that was not what I had remembered. But again, it was the dentist chair. So I was so concerned that it would be disbelieved because, okay, of course she's going to say a dentist chair. It was depicted in the files,
No, I think that specific type of setting to put a child in with all the, I've never gone through the abuse that you have, and I'm scared of going to the dentist. Like, it's scary going into that room anyways. There's so much weird equipment and things that look dangerous and sound scary. There's a reason why dentist chairs and things like that constantly happen in horror movies. Like, it's just like a general fear, I think, that a lot of people have. Yeah. And when you put a child in those situations, if adults are scared of that, who have never been abused in a situation like that, imagine what that does to a child to put them in those situations. Like, it's very common. There's dental sets and even offices. I've heard that this, takes place in actual dentist office too, are set up for these types of things. Thousands and thousands of testimonies have come up of children that are now adults testifying that they were abused in that same exact setting. So I just want to validate you here because I'm sure it's hard to talk about these things. And I'm so grateful that you are, because so many others have gone through the same thing and you're corroborating them and validating others who haven't spoken out yet. So thank you for sharing. And you're absolutely not crazy whatsoever.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really strange to hear that. It's also surreal right now, it's really surreal, especially when you've been kind of you've had all of these memories and you kind of found sort of comfort in telling yourself that, okay, maybe it was made up in my head, maybe it was just whatever. And then to see it released so publicly all of a sudden without any warning. And then there's all of these other people that can remember the things that you thought you experienced solely, and you've had all this shame and guilt about. Now it's all over the media and everyone knows about it. It's just, I can't explain that feeling. I was just thinking, speaking to you there, this is something I haven't seen anywhere, but I also remember being brought to a clinic when I was about 3 or 4. My mom brought me, and I was taken into this little old-fashioned school desk and sat down. And my mom disappeared. She was gone then. And this old woman came over with a pump and a needle. And she was smiling. And I didn't know what was going on. And then next of all, I was wreathed by my shoulders out of the chair and brought over to the corner, this bed in a corner. And all of a sudden, I had 2 people pinning each one of my arms down and there were 2 people on each leg. I was just completely surrounded by people, and I was screaming, and then I can't remember anything after that. But I know the setting was like, it was like a blood clinic or an office. And again, I've tried to ask my mom about that, and she will never give me an explanation. She knows what I'm talking about. But anytime I'm like, okay, so what was that for? She's like, oh, no, it was just something to do with your dad, something to do with your childhood. Like, it doesn't matter. But I was so traumatized from just like even that experience as well. Um, and then as well as in adulthood, things I suppose that I found not reassuring, I suppose, in the fact that my memories, trauma did obviously take place regardless of what I can remember or not. But are that from a young age, I started displaying like really severe issues with my hips. And apparently that can be quite common in adult survivors of childhood abuse because their hips were like forced in certain ways before they were properly developed. And another thing that I've recently added the dots with, and it's been so kind of like closure, I suppose. I have never been able to scream ever. When I was little, I lost my scream because I damaged my vocal cords, but I never knew how. It was only when I was playing in school, when we came to Ireland in the schoolyard, we would be running around and everyone would be screaming, and I would try and scream and a squeak would come out, and everyone would start laughing at me because they thought it was really funny, and they'd be like, do it again. And then it was then when my sister and I were about 15, and we were on this like date. It was like this really innocent double date with these 2 guys that were the same age as us. We went to the playground, and they were pushing us on the swings, and one of them pushed me right up into the air, and I let out that squeak again. And they thought it was hilarious, and they kept like pushing me to try and make me like squeak. But I now know that it was because my vocal cords were damaged from the age I was when I was little. And then again, I remember being like 3 and 4, and a common nightmare, reoccurring nightmare I would have is that I would be lying in my bed and these men would come in and they would take me by the hands and legs out of the place, and I would try to scream, but nothing would come out. It's funny how it affects you, and kind of like it's not only there can be physical signs as well as obviously mental, and
How was school for you? Because you seem to, from what it sounds like in the play therapy, you had some conscious awareness that things weren't necessarily right at home. Even if you didn't have context that you were being abused, you still, thought highly of your father at this time. But your body and mind were still able to sort of enact some abuse scenarios. So on some level, there was like some awareness that like things might not be right. How did that impact you at school, and even having these confusing things like, why can't I scream? Like what was life like for you, and friendships and things like that?
In the beginning, when I first started, we were in an all-girls Catholic dorm school. My junior infant teacher when I was 5, she didn't like me. My mom was called into school quite a few times to say that I was displaying concerning signs of abuse and reenacting things and stuff. Especially if we were playing with dolls, I would get quite angry if there was like a family of dolls and anyone would separate the family, which was something I did in play therapy as well in Canada. I would always go to a doll's house, and I would put the 2 girls and the mom together in the house, and then I would place my dad outside the front door. And my play therapist said it was because I was confused about where he stood in my life, but I needed him to just be there somewhere. But in school, no, my teacher didn't like me. I had OCD, severe OCD, but I didn't know what it was at this stage. And it wasn't spoken about. It wasn't like a known kind of thing. It wasn't acknowledged. So I remember having all of these thoughts and not understanding them and feeling very isolated because of that and feeling very strange. I felt like I was the weird, like this weird kid, which I kind of was. But anyway, we would have to color in things. The teacher would tell us, you have to color these things in gray. So like we would have an elephant that we had to color, and we were learning how to color inside the lines. So you'd have to outline the elephant in one color and color it in another color. But my mom's favorite color was blue and my sister's favorite color was yellow. So in order for them, in my mind, not to die, I had to color everything in blue and yellow. And my teacher just hated me because she thought I was just retaliating. I wasn't listening. So I would always be put in a corner, standing in a corner facing the wall. And then on another occasion, my mom picked me up from school and she found this piece of paper in my school bag. Again, from junior infants when I was 5. And it had listed out, I am a pig. I am a cow. I am nothing. And my mom brought the piece of paper into my teacher and she absolutely went through her. But my teacher just denied everything. So yeah, school wasn't easy. I was bullied really bad. There was this one particular girl, she knew that I had this thing where I would let people do stuff to me and I wouldn't talk about it. I would not tell anyone. The fact my mom had found that thing was she found it. And even after that, I still tried to protect my teacher. I don't know why. She was terrible. I did not like her. But this girl, she would pick on me, and it started off small. Until one day in the schoolyard, she ended up grabbing me, and she fractured my hip a week before my first communion, and I had a bruised pelvis. So that was not fun. And then eventually I became the class clown then. And I found that I gained so much popularity through that. And I remember these moments of being in school and coming home. And I would come home and I would be so overtaken with sadness and grief. And I would wonder, why am I this happy person in school, but I come home, what's wrong with me? And I remember going into school and asking the girls, again, I was 6. I would ask them, do you like the funny me? Do you like her? And they would have no idea what I was talking about. And I would be like, no, but do you like her? Because if I wasn't funny, would you still be my friend? Would you like me if I was sad? And they were like, girl, they were so confused. They had no idea what I was going on about. But yeah, it was very kind of, I don't know. So yeah, this school wasn't great. But again, we still had friends, so that was good. But yeah, a lot of bullying.
It's amazing how, in hindsight now as an adult, I look back on going to school and I look back on people like class clowns and the quiet ones, or the ones that just totally didn't behave, or the bullies, and just how sort of stereotypical we categorize people. If you're misbehaving, you're just misbehaving, you're bad. Mm-hmm. Teachers don't take the time, students don't know to ask themselves why, what's going on that a child would misbehave. If most kids don't, and all of a sudden there are a couple that do, why? Yeah. We just sort of penalize the kid, and or dislike them or punish them, or give them some type of send them to the principal, or there's repercussions taken, but that question never comes into context. Things like OCD, misbehaviors, something like you asking kids these sort of obscure questions do you like the funny me? Trauma never comes into the equation, or abuse. It's just let's treat the side effect of all of this and never ask an underlying question of why, and like my heart breaks when I look back at my own childhood and I think like, oh my gosh, how many missed opportunities of children that were going through similar things like you at home, and came to school and were like enacting things or misbehaving or whatever it is. And they were punished for it, or they were bullied for it, or they were sent to the principal's office or kicked out of school or given detention, when like it was really like an expression of what was happening at home that like the child could not have a context for or process or know what to do with. And like they're expressing it at school in some way that is looked at as unhealthy or misbehaving, when it's a really like such a cry for help, or like an obvious like, hey, I'm being abused, or I'm going through something hard that I don't know how to conceptualize, and like it breaks my heart thinking of you as this little girl going through all of this and like not knowing, what you know now as an adult about it. And, everybody, like all the red flags are there and like nobody's coming to your rescue. Like nobody is asking these questions. Nobody's saying why or what's going on, or like, can you talk to me about this? Or they're just like, oh, she's a bad kid. Or what are you talking about, Della, that the funny you, or laughing at you because you can't scream. Nobody's like, why can't she scream? Like, what happened to you? Are you injured? Or you're just like trying to manage like all of these really hard things. And like, I just want to take a moment and like let my heart break for you for a second. Cause like, I can't imagine like, kind of growing up and being like, oh my gosh, all this stuff happened to me. And like, it was all related to what was going on at home. Like I wasn't a bad kid. I was going through bad things. Bad people were doing bad things to me. And I was going to school and like, didn't know how to react from it. And my vocal cords were damaged and people made fun of me for it. But like, that wasn't my fault. Like, it's kind of like a moment where you can take that shame off and like put it back on people that deserved it, instead of carrying those really heavy things that you went through and the, kind of secondary abuse that you were experiencing at school from people who had no idea what to do with you or like how to respond to you.
No, absolutely.
It's like there's just so many missed opportunities of, intervention potentially, or just like comforting a child that might be going through these hard things. Like teachers probably miss this all the time. And they're like, well, I didn't see a bruise, so they're not being abused. And it's like, yeah, but they're misbehaving. There could be a reason why they're misbehaving. It doesn't have to look like a bruise or an injury. Injuries present themselves in a lot of different ways. So thanks for sharing that. I hope it helps somebody on the other end who might be still carrying shame or maybe not correlating what was going on to abuse or hard things. And hopefully we can like set some of those childhood, guilt and shame strongholds that we have out and be like, that wasn't our fault. We shouldn't have been like feeling bad about that as a child. Like we were going through something hard, and like who wouldn't react those same ways or like be hurt or misbehave or things like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I think every child's behavior has to be kind of looked at. I think in the society that we are in now, it's almost overanalyzed. Hence, every child is diagnosed with something from a really early age. But I do think that when children, especially really, really young children, are acting out or they're doing something, it's always for a reason, And just because the child doesn't come out straight and tell you, this is what's happening to me, or they're not reenacting sexual abuse, especially if they're going into themselves, if they're really kind of withdrawing from you, that's like a huge, huge red flag. But if there's massive shift in their behavior, it really shouldn't be ignored. And it's not about, oh, they're just going through a growth spurt or character development. If a child has a massive personality shift overnight, it needs to be looked at.
100%. And one of the things that you mentioned that you were kind of going through with all of this was you had, was it your first communion, you said? Mm-hmm. So you were raised Catholic, mm-hmm. and going to a Catholic church. Was religion like a big part of your life, or was that just kind of something that one or both of your parents partook in?
No, it was when we got back to Ireland, but funny enough, we were not baptized until we were 9.
Okay.
And we always asked our mom about that because we always said, like, you used to pray with us every single night. She used to pray with us every night. We celebrated all of the kind of Catholic celebrations, and we were raised as Catholic from birth, but we were not baptized when we were younger.
Mm.
And I remember as well, my dad, he came for a visit when we were about 10. And it was very out of the blue. He just took a flight over to Ireland and said he was coming for a visit. He contacted the courts, they allowed it. And he sat us down with a laptop and basically like drilled into us how Satan is kind of not an enemy and how all God worshippers are the enemy and bad. And that are like our mom is like one of them because she's holy and she whatever, like, yeah, it's interesting to look back at.
The inversions of it. And that can be traumatizing too, to recover from, if religion's been used against a child in an abusive way, to, later on in life have, adults around you that are talking about these things the opposite way than what your father's telling you. It's very confusing. And then it can also be hard to recover as an adult if you do want to get, into some type of a religious faith as part of your healing, to have to grapple with the inversions that you were taught as a child and recover from that. Cause it's like really disgusting to look back at something like that. Like, why would your dad, we know why, your dad seems like he was a psychopath, but, adults telling children these things, your mother is, a bad person because she's holy. This is what's good, is people that worship Satan. Like, what a sick thing to, tell a child. So that's interesting that you also had that going on at the same time. You're being like horrifically abused, and then you're also partaking in religious ceremonies through the Catholic Church that are more holy and pure at the same time.
Yeah.
And so at what age was it your mom ended up getting full custody?
We were 5.
5. Okay.
So when we came back to Ireland, she was granted full custody. But over the years, he would bring her to court and then show up in Ireland for a visit. And he would, I think it was when we were 6 or 7 again, he lost his job due to a disability or something like that. And he sold his house in America. And then all of a sudden, he lost everything. And it was kind of like he was running. He just uprooted his life that he had and came to Ireland. And then he was asking my mom if he could stay with us. And my mom was like, no, oh my God, no. So then he booked a flight to, I think it was Amsterdam or something. And then he disappeared there for a while. And then he booked a flight to Thailand. And then he went over to Thailand, and then he got a woman pregnant over there, and then got full custody of that child, who still has full custody of today. But yeah, and then again, when a child was present in his life, his finances were always okay.
Wow. Yeah. Oh my goodness. And so what kind of transpired after he would pop into your life here and there? You saw him a couple times where he would take you somewhere. Mm-hmm. When did that kind of fizzle out? When did he stop, or did you guys stop contact kind of altogether at that time?
So we haven't seen him since we were about 10 or 11. And then I suppose essentially, before he moved to Thailand and he had another child, we didn't see him after that. When I was 14, I had to reach out to him because his mother, my grandmother, was dying, and no one wanted to tell him. So I told him, And his biggest concern, I think, at the time was her will and if he was in it. And that was the only thing we spoke about. And then when I was 15 or 16, I got this message request on Facebook from a woman. And I opened it, and it was from his now ex-wife. And she was distraught. There was a language barrier because she was from Thailand. She had not a lot of education, for especially like trying to translate, let alone read and write. She already had like 5 other children. She lived in immense poverty. So I called her, and through a lot of like patience and translating and stuff like that, we eventually kind of like started to understand each other. And she told me that she started sending me all these emails from him that he had sent her that were absolutely horrific and vulgar. They were just disgusting. About him saying like, you're never going to see your daughter again. So she was really upset. She didn't know what was happening. He just changed overnight and left and took the child. So I contacted him. And I pretended that I wanted to be in his life again. And over the next few months, we would build up this really strong mother or father-daughter relationship. He'd send me pictures of my little sister. Eventually, he forwarded me a video of her running around in just a tutu with no underwear on. And immediately I was like, okay, bingo. So I took the video and I sent it to the FBI, like the people who specialize in like online child pornography and stuff like that. Because I knew that no one would investigate it properly without like sort of some form of evidence. So immediately they got back to me. And I explained the situation to them. And then from there, I was working with their America's time zone, Thailand's time zone, and my own. And just kind of like, I was the contact between the mother and them as well, and then my dad. So they were telling me like kind of like what to ask him. They were trying to build up a case. They wanted to raid his house. They were investigating her play school, interviewing teachers. Now, obviously, the teachers didn't know what they were there for. I think they just gave some sort of generic excuse that they were doing it everywhere. But they confirmed that my little sister was showing signs of sexual abuse, like immediately. They were able to tell. And it was all the same stuff that my sister and I would have done when we were children. But long story short, he was convinced I was going to go over there. He was going to help me go to medical school and teach me how to drive, and I was going to raise her. I was going to be the female figure in her life. She was about 3 or 4 at the time. On Father's Day, ironically, they raided his house. Someone tipped him off because by the time they got there and kicked his door down, he was sitting in a corner waiting for them with his arms crossed. Now, because they had like one shot to do this. When they did this initial walkthrough, they already knew the floor plans. They estimated where like the plug sockets would be, where everything was. They had one opportunity to try and find something virtual. I don't know if that's the right word, like a laptop or something. They needed a sign of someone engaging in, illegal online activities kind of thing. But he had cleared everything. Everything was gone, cleared. The only thing they were almost able to hold him on was this device. It was like a stick thing or something like that only people who engage in activities on the dark web would own. No normal person would have it. But that was it. And he was ordered to bring her back. They were in New Mexico at this stage. he was ordered by court to bring her back to Thailand so the child could have a relationship with her mother. But after a couple of months, he just brought her back to New Mexico again, where he lives with her now. So, and she's about 11 or 12 now. So there's no saving her.
Oh my gosh, that's so sad.
And I know she hates me from whatever stories my dad would have fed her, because she's like, I know she had a social media for a while, because I always I always try to find if there's anything on her. And then he made Ellie's mother, that's my little sister's name, her mother blocked me on everything, because she messaged me then and she was like, Ellie doesn't understand why you're friends with me on Facebook, and she says I need to block you. So I'm always here for you, but I'm still here, and you know.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I just want to say though, like, that's so badass that you started an investigation all by yourself and got his house raided either way, that he wasn't infallible in that moment, even though he was, because he was tipped off, but you still let him, like, you played his game better than him for a minute, which is pretty amazing. And then after that, did you guys just stop talking altogether again?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, he emailed me and he said, basically, I know what you did. And just because ironically it was Father's Day, for dramatic effect, I was like, Happy Father's Day. And because I freaked out, I was like, oh my God. And then, yeah, he was like, for the safety of myself and my daughter, you'll have no part in our lives anymore. Yeah, it's the last time we spoke.
And so at this point, you obviously had memories of what had been done to you. And did your sister at the same time, was she kind of on the same page with you, as like remembering and kind of, conspiring against him and not talking with him as well?
Yeah, no, my sister, she would have a lot more memories than what I would have. I buried things apparently a lot more than she did. But she would have more solid memories of the actual abuse that we went through. But anything that we've always been so weird about speaking about it to each other. So like growing up, again, around my mother, we were never allowed to talk about it. We were never allowed to ask questions. We were never allowed to look at photographs of ourselves as kids without it being a really painful experience. So it basically just had to be pushed out. And if we ever brought it up, it was always like by my mom. It was like, why are you bringing this up now? We've moved on from this. Why can't you move on? We don't talk about this. I can't do this right now. So we always felt a lot of guilt and shame around it. And then I think it was like only in the last couple of years, we kind of started talking a little bit about it to each other. And I was like, we were very skeptical because we didn't want to affect each other's memories either. But we kind of were like, I was like, do you remember anything about, like a forest or anything? And she was like, why, do you? And I was like, yeah, maybe it's like, do you? And she was like, oh my God. And then we realized, and we started talking, and we realized that we had shared, we weren't crazy. We had these same memories that we've gone all of these years without discussing. And they linked up,
Were you both close before that, or a little bit separated because of kind of that elephant in the room that you guys didn't talk about? And then are you close now that you've come together and started talking about it?
It was a mixture. It's always been kind of like back and forth. I think my sister has always, like, I think for a while she held a lot of resentment towards me, because I'm the only person that experienced those things with her. And I'm a constant reminder of what happened. So there have been periods where we have gone without talking, and she's been really angry at me for different things. But we've always found our way back to each other. She lives on the other side of the world now. She's doing really well, but yeah, I would say we're really close. Like I feel like she's like a limb. If she was one of my limbs, if anything happened to her, I don't know what I would do. I'm not me without my sister, you know.
It's pretty amazing that you have somebody in such close proximity, such as a twin, that does remember and can corroborate with you and her. You know, you hear so many times survivors that end up doing what you did and, you know, breaking the cycle and speaking out and ultimately trying to recover from all of that and recover memories at the same time. And just the way that the families treat people and they become so isolated and actually do feel alone and are like, am I the crazy one? Because everybody's abandoned me and is telling me I'm crazy. I must be, you know, and they feel like they're kind of the only one and they're just kind of stuck with those memories and those obscure things that they're remembering. And pretty amazing that you have somebody that you can ask those questions to that's saying, yes, I do remember something similar that you do.
My sister, I will say, she was always really skeptical when it came to the whole Ghislane and dentist chair and mansion things. Because again, they were something I always spoke about from a young age, and my mom, she didn't listen. And my sister, she did say to me recently, she was like, I am so sorry. She said, it makes sense now because she has memories of a woman. That's the description of like Ghislane, or she has memories of the mansion as well. She doesn't have memories. I don't know. She does have memories of the dentist chair as well. Um, we've never talked about the dark things very heavily. Again, it's this concern that I don't want my memories to be false, or like, you know, I want to remember things as clear as I can, but she did say to me that she was skeptical when Ghislane had come up on the television. I was like, that's her. She was like, she straight out told me, she was like, yeah, I didn't believe you. And my mom always dismissed it as well. She never believed me, and it was only a couple of weeks ago, because my mom's on like watching things on social media and stuff. She looked at me and she kind of had this moment of defeat, and she said everything you described as a child, like it's all there. Like it's all there. And I was like,
Wow.
yeah. So yeah.
What a validating moment. Oh my goodness. And so
Yeah.
for you, you know, again, you're so young, even what we just talked about, you're calling the FBI and starting investigations at like 15, 16 years old. Like most kids that age aren't even aware of like what the FBI does. Like they're just trying to like get their driver's permit and like go to school and like party, you know, and you're like starting legit investigations against, you know, a pedophile ring potentially that you were born into. And so between there and kind of now, was there anything significant that happened either with him or anything else in your life that was significant before you decided to start speaking out about it and kind of more diving into your decided to start diving more into your story and talking with your sister?
And I suppose when you're a survivor of kind of like type of that type of situation, or any kind of sexual assault or young childhood abuse like that, it's quite common to find yourself in similar positions through teenage years and adulthood and etc., because you're trying to seek comfort in what your normal is. So I, over the years, have found myself in a lot of really traumatic situations. And I have been assaulted more times than I can count on my fingers, by different people. Especially, so 2 years ago on the night of my birthday, I was attacked by a random stranger when I was walking home. And I think that was the changing moment. Um, because that night when I was on this side of the road, like I didn't react like the standard reaction to an attack is, which is like fight or flight. I did what people don't think about doing, and I yelled. I yelled, and inevitably that is what saved my life, because people heard me from a really long distance away, and they started running towards my yelling until they eventually found me. But the way in which I was hurt and assaulted by this man, it was very triggering. And I remember there was a certain point where I was kicked in the spine, and I froze, and I thought that was it. That was it. And everything went quiet. And when I heard running, I heard footsteps coming towards us. I thought that these were in my head. I went back to where I was when I was a kid, and I thought these people were coming in to join in on the abuse or on the assault. And I just started freaking out, absolutely freaking out. So I think since then, that's definitely triggered a lot of my childhood trauma, and I suppose, yeah, a lot of suppressed things. Yeah, sorry.
I'm so sorry that that happened to you. And that's so common. We're not taught about, you don't go to school and learn about trauma, much less how to heal from it. You don't learn about what narcissists are. You don't learn about shame and guilt. We learn so many things except what trauma and healing are, which are like the biggest things that impact us throughout our life. And it's so easy to get into those patterns where you're dating people or around people that exhibit kind of the same patterns that you're used to in abusers. Even if you know that you don't want to be around abusive people, it's really hard to separate what's been normalized your entire life, especially if it hasn't been identified to you and you haven't been able to research it and understand it and see it for what it is and heal from it. And that's just devastating that other people saw that vulnerability in you and took advantage of it. And,
I think something like to be aware of, like with particularly like with survivors that are going through a really difficult time, or someone that's gone through a really traumatic experience and that people don't seem to like take note of. It's not necessarily a new relationship that this person has gotten into quickly after the trauma, or people associate, okay, like that person's drinking excessively, or they've gotten into like a bad crowd. People kind of like look for that, not necessarily that they intervene or even at that stage, but what they don't look for is that group of friends or that person that comes into that person's life and seems really supportive. Especially with men and women, like a man coming into a woman's life, a vulnerable woman, but with women too, who appear as friends, because this is the ultimate time for them to smell blood. They're seeking prey. That's when they find women to traffic and women to pull into like so many things, and no one on the outside sees it. But yeah, I think if people have gone through something really traumatic and you see them getting into a relationship really quickly with a man, or a friendship with a woman, or a relationship with a woman, you need to look at that. It's not always like this supportive, healthy thing. It's more often than not, not from my experiences anyway.
Right. And just like how you were explaining with your dad's persona publicly, abusers don't come in and look abusive. They don't they don't come in wearing a mask and a cape and, looking satanic or evil. Like they do come in love bombing and being very charming and playing a part and having stability in their life, maybe having money and a successful career, and so it can also be extremely deceptive to fall for the patternings, because it looks from the outside, it can look so, glamorous and polished, and, it sort of just sweeps you off your feet. And then before you know it, it's like, wait a minute, this isn't what I thought it was. Like, what happened? And so it's also really interesting, the psychology of abusers. It's so different than, who we've been taught abusers are, stranger danger.
Exactly,
And
yeah.
they look this like evil way. Like, no, they don't.
They're extremely calculated, and more often than not as well, they're extremely educated people, because it takes a really intelligent person to know all the depths of manipulation and how to get into someone's head and create that kind of like limerence. And you need me to survive. Like, you're nothing without me. I am a good person. It takes a massive amount for someone to be able to convince someone about like all of those things. But they do it. They do it every day, and they're really good at it.
Yes, you're 100% right. And so I want to talk about you deciding to speak out. Why did you decide to do that? And was there a defining moment with that you sort of made you decide or solidified that decision for you?
I think after going through what I went through, after the recent assault, some kind of friends and stuff came forward to me and shared their experiences with me. And I thought I was so isolated in what I was experiencing and what I was feeling, until I realized, no, every girl has a story. And that may sound like so like oversaid. It's not. It's true. Every woman you speak to will have some form of story. And I think of my little sister and also my children now, and I feel like I have kind of like, I owe it to them to start spreading awareness on these things, because they're not being spoken about enough. There's a fear when it comes to survivors. There's a fear of judgment. There's a fear of just gossip and how they'll be perceived, and backlash, being believed. There's so many aspects that isolate victims and cause them to be too scared to speak out. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it then. Like I thought I was gonna die that night, as I have many other nights. Like, that is not my first near-death experience. I have nearly died way too many times. And I'm like, well, I'm still here for a reason, Like, I have to still be here for a reason. It's funny, I was just thinking to myself as well. When I was 20, 20, I booked a one-way ticket to Greece. And I was working in a doctor's surgery over there, and I got really sick. And long story short, I came home, and I ended up in the hospital with encephalitis and meningitis. And it affected my ability to walk and talk. I was in the hospital for a couple of months. And it also affected my memory. But I will never forget the peace I felt, because I couldn't remember anything, nothing. I just knew where I was in the present moment. And as someone like who's constantly like this, it was a humbling experience, because I couldn't speak. So it made me sit with myself and just think. It was a little bit short-lived. I wish that stuck with me a bit longer. It is now, after I was assaulted, it kind of came back, where I was like, okay, I need to stop and think, and just, there's definitely times in life that will ground you and pull you back in your tracks. There's been so many moments where I've almost been silenced and like that not been here. And I think like that, if I'm still here, it's for a reason. I'm not scared to talk about it anymore. I don't care about the shame or whatever. If someone feels disgusted by me, they can leave. I'm on my own completely. I do have good friends now, which I'm very grateful for. I adore them. But in terms of like family and stuff like that, I'm very much on my own with my kids. Um, and I've been let down by everybody. Like there's every single person that I don't expect anything from anyone, and that's okay. That's a good thing now. Um, because I'm not afraid of what I can lose by speaking out, apart from obviously like it's just my kids are my main priority. I'm rambling now. But yeah. um, yeah, I'm not afraid to talk out. So if I'm not afraid to talk out and I can do it for other women and children, I'm gonna do it. And I'm gonna do it because it's uncomfortable. Um, and one of the best things you can do for yourself is put yourself in those uncomfortable situations.
Why did you choose TikTok of all the platforms to start spreading your message?
I was already on TikTok posting makeup tutorials and just different things. I started TikTok after I was assaulted. It was my kind of way of like venting, I suppose. Um, it gave me a reason to just do my makeup and stuff without having to leave the house because I didn't want to go out anymore. Um, and then I was like starting to do little lives and stuff and make friends, and it was a fun experience. I personally didn't experience much activity on it apart from weird men. But then again, like that, my boundaries are so strange that when a man is really disrespectful to me, I kind of just like it doesn't, you know, that's a them problem. It doesn't like sit with me. So I started talking a bit about the assault on TikTok and just that like period of survival. Um, and then eventually I started posting like little videos, and in one video before the files came out and everything, I had said about the tunnels in Hollywood and stuff like that. At the end of a makeup video, I kind of just mentioned it to see if people would say I'm crazy, you know, like what is wrong with you? But no one really said anything. It was kind of like, oh yeah, she posted that. Um, so then when everything started coming out, I think it was like 6 or 7 days before I actually uploaded a video speaking about what happened to me because I was throwing up every day. Um, it was this massive like confrontation, and it was like, this is out now. This you have to speak about it. You have to talk about it now. Um, and I was so torn, and I was so scared. I kind of thought I owed it to my younger self to press the post button, that it would kind of be therapeutic if I just pressed post, that it would be out there. I've finally spoken about it and said it. So I posted it, and I thought I was going to delete it. I really did. And then it went viral. And then again, I continued to get sick for the next week every day. And I'm still kind of a mess about the whole thing. I'm still scared. I'm not like this bulletproof, you know, kind of, I'm still very much afraid about judgment. Um, and yeah, it's a lifelong journey of convincing yourself that you're not the person that has to be ashamed, you know?
And what's been the overall response? There's always trolls. But aside from, these weird men, what's been the overall response so far from you sharing these really hard truths online?
I've had thousands of survivors reach out to me. And it's connected me with a lot of survivors. And just people saying that they've never spoken about it before. And that they've watched me speak about it, and that it's encouraged them to speak about it. So sorry.
Okay. How's that affected you?
It feels really surreal. Like I keep wanting to delete my whole account and delete everything. I'm like, I need to just crawl. Like again, I just gotta crawl into a hole and cease to exist now. Like I can't do this anymore. Again, anytime I leave the house or go to the gym or something, and I'm like, is that person looking at me? They know something I've been carrying this whole time. Do you know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
out there. Um, And
It's like you want to be seen so bad, and then all of a sudden you're seen, and it's like you feel this giant
never mind.
spotlight
Like,
on you. It's like,
let's take it back. Yeah. But then I see these other survivors coming and saying these things to me and saying that they're watching every day. And I feel a bit of guilt about not posting more. There's so many things I want to say, but fear at the moment, I suppose, is stopping me, and that's why I'm doing this podcast. Because you appeared like a little angel, and you were so supportive and encouraging, and I was like, if there's anyone I want to speak to about this, it's you. Because I suppose it kind of helps when someone's here with you, and you're not doing it by yourself.
yeah.
You know. But yeah, it's all of the other people who have reached out to me with their stories are the reason that I'm still throwing up. No, I'm kidding. I'm still doing this and speaking about it.
For survivors who are struggling, who might not have anybody that they feel they can relate to, who are just starting to maybe go on their healing journey or even remember the things that they buried, what would you tell them after being somebody that's spoken out, who's grappled with a lot of these things, you know, and who now does have a community around her?
I would say just because the world has decided to listen now does not mean it is your time to speak. And I'm saying that in a way of don't be forced into doing something that you're uncomfortable with doing. You don't owe your story or your experiences to anybody. I will say that earlier on you get therapy for trauma, the better. It's not necessarily, people seem to think, okay, it's okay to push it down. I'll address that later. I'll address that when I'm older, or when I've achieved this, when I've gotten through college, when I've gotten married. I'll address it then when things have calmed down. There's never going to be a time in your life where things are comfortable. It's always going to be a little bit uncomfortable, but the best thing you can do is, regardless if you want to speak out about it to the world or to friends or to family, is seek help for yourself first, because you may, like I have, engage in, I suppose, toxic patterns or mindsets or different things that you are actually not aware of. You may not be aware that you're doing them. Seek therapy for yourself first, regardless of when you're ready to deal with it. You don't have to talk about it. You can go to therapy. You can sit there for an hour. You can talk about the weather. It's just doing something for you, and you will eventually speak about it when you're ready to, but it's also about actively doing something for yourself about it. That in itself can be extremely empowering. And the shame is not yours to carry. It's not yours to carry, even though it will take, and it can take, well, for me anyway, a lifetime to believe that. Shame is not yours to carry. I think as well, like, people in society today are like programmed to depict this like perfect and aesthetically pleasing life. And when people don't fit into that, they're not sure where they fit at all. If they don't fit with what's trending online, they're not sure where to place themselves. And people are very uncomfortable with sitting with themselves now as well, because of the level of distraction that is available to us. But one of the most important things you can do is sit with your feelings and feel them, not push them down, because they always come out in some way or form or action. And again, therapy. That's why you should go to therapy. And even if you're just sitting there talking about your thing you baked on Saturday, it's I'm rambling, but yeah. And also, I'm proud of you because you're still here if you're watching this.
How do you keep going when things get so rough and you do just want to quit, or in those moments where you are throwing up and want to delete your account? Like what is it that you hang on to in those dark moments?
First of all, my children. I'm a mother of two boys. So them, every day, every second, them. Before them, I almost didn't stay here. I almost didn't hang on or make it through. But again, that is why I'm a firm believer that there has to be a reason I'm still here now. So yeah. I have hope that things will get better. And I've been through way too much shit to just give up now. Like, surely to God, something has to, like, something's got to get a bit better sometime. Like, they're like, oh yeah, you go through hard times and then the good comes. Well,
You're
it's
due for
coming
it.
any day now. Yeah.
And speaking of parenting, do you have any guidance as somebody who's been a child who went through horrific things through your own parent, and just knowing the dangers out there, even as, a young adult, all the things that you went through after the abuse that you survived from your father, what advice would you give to parents with small children who might not be aware of these things or trying to navigate the just harsh landscape of our world today?
Don't trust anyone except yourself. Even if it's your partner, you have to be with them 24/7. The thing is, you can never trust another person fully, ever. I know that sounds really cynical, but so often the biggest abusers are the people that you know. If there are signs, don't brush them off. If there's any signs of abuse, if there's any marks where there shouldn't be, do not brush them off. Limit. If you have a babysitter or you have family and you have a young child and you are comfortable with them watching your child, limit the people that are changing their nappy. Know exactly who is in charge of that role. Teach your children about safe touching. Teach your children about their bodies, and don't sugarcoat the names of them. Because if something happens to them, they need to be able to communicate with you. Another big thing is teach your children to be loud. So often predators will go after the quiet children. They don't want kids that are going to put up a fight and who are going to speak about what happened to them. So teach them to be loud, teach them to talk, teach them there are no keeping secrets from anybody. Doesn't matter if it's grandma, doesn't matter if it's your uncle, there's no secrets. And that you are the person that they can come to with everything. And then if anyone ever tells them to keep a secret, that they come straight to you. Limit what you are posting about them on social media. If you are taking pictures of them in the bath or in their nappy running around, what may seem innocent to you because you are a good person is not innocent to other people. There are sick people out there, and there are sick things that people can do now with technology, and it's your duty to protect your child. So yeah, I think that's it. There's probably a lot more, but I think they're the most important ones. And also be aware of who they are friends with and who they're hanging around. Personally, I don't think sleepovers should be a thing right now with everything that's going on in the world. You got to do what you have to do to protect them because they only have one childhood and they can be impacted for the rest of their lives in a split second.
Amen to that. And thank you for all of that. I think we do take for granted some of the blessings that social media and kind of like this public environment allows us. Like, to a lot of us, it's like fun, it's an escape, we get to connect with people. But when you think about it, if we were out in public with our child, how would we feel if all these weird men or these older people took out cameras and started taking pictures of your child? Like, parents would not like that, yet we go do it online and give everybody a picture of our child by uploading it, and we don't know who's on the receiving end of that, who's getting them and what they're doing to modify the photos, or even just the people that just have those super weird fetishes of, babies in baths or whatever it is. Like, there's just so much perversion out there. So I appreciate you speaking on that, because I see that so much and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, somebody's finding that on the other end and like doing something not good with it. And like, that's your baby, like, send it to family and people that you trust, if it's like a funny photo or a cute photo, but like, a child can't consent to those things being online. And with that, like, you don't know what a predator is doing with that photo or video. So thank you for speaking on that, because it's definitely not spoken about enough. And I don't think parents yet are like really concerned about it, because it's not an abuser, that they can see physically, and they're not seeing what that person's doing with the video. It's not like visible to them.
Well, it's the same with actually baby monitors. People have baby monitors that are connected to the internet. It's extremely common for predators to go through baby monitors and watch through them. And you always should check the connected devices. I'm pretty sure on most baby monitors, I've only had like 2 kind of types of them, but you can see who's connected to the device. It's really important to like really stay on top of that as well.
That is frightening. Oh my goodness. But that makes perfect sense. Or even house cameras or things like that people have around their infants. Yeah. Thank you for sharing about all of that. It's so scary these days. There's so many things that we have to think about today that, parents and children decades ago, like, it wasn't even a thing to worry about. And now we're just bombarded by surveillance that, bad people can tap into anytime. But it's presented to us as being something helpful. Your phone, it's something good. Camera can keep you safe. But like, we don't realize that there's things that actually compromise us with this technology too, that we need to also think about just as much. So thank you for speaking on all of that.
I mean, I know that people are like, there's this strong opinion of like, let kids be kids. Like, I'm not going to put shorts under my daughter's dress because it's hot out, and she's a child, or I'm not going to not upload photographs of them because there might be this, or there is, there are. That's it. You have to protect them. It's just the world we live in. It's the world we've always lived in, but it's more prevalent now because of things like the internet and social media.
Well, for people listening, if you guys have questions for Della, of course, reach out to her, and I'm going to bring her TikTok page up. But, go down the comments. I'd love to have her back again. And she has had just an extremely incredible story of overcoming so much darkness. And so if you guys have questions for her, or things that you want her to dive deeper into on a different episode, or if you just want to reach out to her on your own and ask her yourself, I would really encourage you guys to. And I'm going to show her TikTok page. So one of the things I get asked the most, what can I do to help? I'm busy. I'm a mom. I work. I don't have all this time to do a lot. Well, one of the easiest things, it's free, is to just go support survivors on their social media. And Della, do you just want to talk a little bit about, like, we talked a little bit about your journey going on to TikTok. Do you want to talk a little bit about just your page and anything that you want people to know, or how they can engage with you here?
I mean, yeah, you can message me anytime. TikTok it's not about followers or anything like that. Me, I think I had followers from like the makeup stuff, and I gained a lot of following from speaking out about the trauma. The one thing I will say is there's a lot of comfort in the videos that I posted in regards to human trafficking and stuff, because the comments are mainly just survivors sharing their stories with each other and supporting each other, and there can be comfort in that. But yeah, my TikTok's a bit all over the place, because sometimes I'm posting about like a random makeup tutorial, and then I'm like, and then it's like trauma. I'm not too fussed about followers or anything, as long as people are seeing and hearing And if someone feels seen, well then, yeah, we've done good.
And look at this one. Look at you as a little girl. This little girl is so proud of you today. And look at that. 1.8 million people saw this. I mean, that's amazing. There's not a better time in history to be a survivor. You know, nobody asks to be one, but man, what a great time that we live in, where you can go online and people are actually now sharing and wanting to engage, and survivors are now feeling confident enough to come out and talk because people like you, Della, decided to. You know, it's just like, it's so amazing how healing social media can also be, despite the dangers. You know, one thing I don't think, you know, these Satanists and these abusers and these rings, you know, they wanted to form the internet and social media in ways that they could utilize against all of us. And I just love the pockets. Yeah, I love the ways that like we're using it against them, and like coming together and doing things that survivors couldn't do before the internet. Learn from each other and connect, and know that they're not alone. And
that's one of the one things that I was actually thinking about. I was going to do a video on it. Was in my videos, people were telling me, don't tag hashtag files or hashtag Epstein or hashtag corruption. Like, don't tag them because your videos aren't going to get seen. And I was like, this isn't about how many people, it's not about how many likes it gets. What it's about is by how many people it does get seen by with those hashtags, because it means we're not hiding. You know, it's not about whatever hashtag you're going to put under there and it's going to reach the most people. I don't want it to reach whoever it is that doesn't really relate to it. I want it to reach the people who are searching those things for a reason. Do you know what I mean? Regardless of if it means you're not going to get as much likes or you're not going to get as much whatever, who cares? It's about saying, no, people are speaking about this, and we're not going to allow you to shadow block us, or, you know what I mean? We're not going to be intimidated by you or allow you to tell us what we can and can't talk about.
And it also allows, if there's survivors who are specifically typing those hashtags in to connect with other people or experiences that they went through, then they're going to find you. So even if, like, you could have one person find you and that's it, but that person, you could change their life because that hashtag led them to your post that they needed and were seeking to see purposely through typing in that hashtag.
Yeah. So like, there's a lot of comments saying, don't hashtag these. And I'm like, no, I'm doing that intentionally. It's completely intentional. Yeah.
And this is kind of off topic. I'm going to actually say this real quick before I switch a topic, and we'll wrap up here too in just a minute. But if you guys are listening and not watching, if you have your phone in your pocket or listening on Spotify or iTunes, her handle on TikTok is _Della, or you can type in Daily Della 6. Whenever I type "Oh no Della" in, it pops up right away. I don't think there's many people on TikTok that have her handle, so it should be pretty easy to find. However, if you're listening, like I said, or maybe you're driving or can't go type that in at that moment, just go down below in the show notes once you get a second, and there's a hyperlink down there. No matter what platform you're on, you can just go in the show notes, click it, and it'll take you right to her TikTok. And like I said, it's a free, easy way to support survivors. You guys can connect with her on her videos, write her DMs. You guys can share her content on your, you can hit the repost button. That way your audience gets to see what she's putting out there. And you guys can help her be seen in algorithms that maybe she is being censored by because she's fearless and putting in the hashtags that other people won't. So your engagement really helps this circulate and be seen a little bit more. I did want to ask you though, just out of curiosity, your thoughts on the Epstein files and like on the Epstein stuff before we wrap up.
I think it's very painful that everything's been released to the public and nothing's being, essentially, things are being done behind the scenes, but you know, the fact that, I won't say certain names, but people in charge are still being allowed to just live like nothing's happened. It's a real kick in the teeth for survivors. Huge kick in the teeth. I will say, I feel like there's way too much focus being placed on celebrity involvement as opposed to the survivors and what they've gone through, and the fact that children are involved in this. Everyone's so fixated on celebrities and what did that celebrity do? Is this celebrity innocent? Take the celebrities out of it, because from my experiences, I'm not going to sit here and list off a list of celebrities that I was abused by. Celebrity, man, woman, whatever, they were one thing to me at the time, and that was an abuser and not a safe person. And that's what we have to focus on, and treat them all the same, because that's not what's happening, and that's why these people are not being brought to justice, because they're on a pedestal. And yeah, I will also say as well, for survivors, it's a very triggering and difficult time. Just because you're seeing things on the files everywhere doesn't mean you have to read them all. Doesn't mean you have to be digging deep into the files and trying to find out stuff. And it's simply a tool, but also don't believe everything that's been released to you, because everything is done with strategy. Like everything is done with strategy. And as well, like those files are only a minority of the things that have been going on. People didn't believe, people are, I've spoken about tunnels. People are in the comments saying there's been nothing about tunnels in the files. And I'm like, okay, but you said the same thing about children's babies' involvement in all of this before that section of files was released. So don't be fooled by what you see, because it's there for a reason.
Yes. And is there any other ways that people can support you, or anything that sort of like your goals for speaking out and things that we can do to help facilitate your mission?
I suppose my mission is just mainly support for survivors, and being a voice for survivors, and making sure that if a survivor is watching this, they don't feel as alone as I have. So I would say be mindful of what you're speaking about in a room. If you're joking about it, if you're making like lighthearted jokes or comments about it, you don't know who's standing next to you has been a victim. As well as support any form of abuse or trauma organizations. There's not a massive amount of them, because the ones that are there are not given enough support. But especially Ramcoa, like there needs to be so much support for survivors that's simply not there. So be vocal about it. If you don't want to talk about abuse, or you don't want to talk about anything like that, talk about support that can be available for the survivors. And yeah, just keep, I suppose, engaging in survivors' testimonies, and if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it. Especially if it's like really negative or judgmental and you have no, like, just don't say it.
Especially if you're a creepy dude listening or watching, like, don't be creepy in the comments, please. Like,
yeah. It's like, what are you thinking right now? It's like, oh, like I've just talked about my childhood thing, and they're like, hey, you look good right now. And it's like, really, dude? Like, I'm what? I have body dysmorphia. I don't even know what I look like. I don't need you right now. I'm traumatized. They're like, it's like, can you call me daddy? It's like, no. Like, read the room. Really?
oh my gosh, girl.
I don't even know what to say to these people anymore. Yeah, sorry, my humor is dark. But yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, thank you for all my heart for coming on. I've been really looking forward to this. I know we didn't talk about, the happiest things in the world this whole time, but just the fact that you're here today, the miracle that you became the hero that you didn't have as a child, just the little girl you once were, so proud of you, and so are all of us. And I'm so excited to see where your journey takes you. and to see what's up next for you and sort of where you end up. I think you have such a powerful voice, and I can't believe this was your first podcast that you did like this. How incredibly well spoken you are and just prepared. So just thank you with all my heart for doing this. I know that this is, you have a lot on your plate and this isn't easy to talk about. So thank you for coming on and sharing all of this with us.
No, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. You're the reason that people are still speaking out and you're giving people a voice. So thank you. Thank you so much.
It's my honor. And for
And
everybody,
it was easy to talk because it was to you. So thank you.
I have tried to do like podcasts by myself, and I end up having to record it like 30 times because it's so much harder to talk to yourself and like just steadily talk than it is to another person. So it is kind of nice to have conversations like this instead of it just, being us online posting videos, which can be really difficult for us sometimes if we're not, in the mindset or whatnot to do it. So I totally agree with you. And I'm grateful that we got to talk finally and that you get to come on and be here with us. Hopefully you can come on again. And like I said, people listening, leave your comments and questions below. Please follow Della on her TikTok. I'm going to have it in the show notes. I'll have all my information down there as well, you guys. We couldn't do this without you. And so thank you guys all for listening. God bless you all, and we will see you next time.